No matter how well you do in life, how far you come, it's important to stay humble and remember where you came from. The new 8th generation Vauxhall Astra is a deeply modern car with its Star Trek-like styling and hybrid drive. But under all that technology and its blingy interior, it still is, as it always has been, a humble family hatchback. So let's go back to the roots of that story, where the forward-rivaling Vauxhall family car all began. The Mk1 Vauxhall Astra. But first, our friends at Lancaster Insurance are running monthly giveaways. You can win all sorts, from experience days to tools, restaurant vouchers and tech. So check the video description for full details and to enter. In the 1970s, Vauxhall had offered quite a strong challenge to Ford in the family car market. Its Chevette had been incredibly popular. It looked cool, it had the trademark Vauxhall droop snoot nose on it, and it had sold 415,000 units. But by the late 70s, rear-wheel drive in a family car was seen as awfully outdated, next to front-driven rivals like the Golf, Austin Maxi and the Citroën GS. Now by this point, Vauxhall was well in with its European cousins Opel. The Mk1 Cavalier had been a great example of the two brands working together to produce two separate cars that were largely identical to save on time and development costs. Originally the plan had been for Vauxhall to take Opel's Kadett family hatchback that challenged Ford in Europe, graft on its droop snoot nose and introduce a saloon variant. But time and budget constraints meant GM said no. In fact, the new Vauxhall hatch would be a straight rebadge of Opel's Kadett. So in 1979, that very car hit British Vauxhall showrooms. The all-new Vauxhall Astra. Yes, it is a strict rebadging exercise, but the Astra made a good first impression. The Chevette was a cool looking thing, but definitely dated and of its time. The Astra, meanwhile, was a clean sheet. It was sharp, it was minimalist, and it was crisp and modern to look at. It didn't date nearly as quickly as the Chevette because it was a much simpler and neater design, much like the Mk1 Cavalier. Even today, this is a smart and quite modern looking car. And that minimalist and modern theme continued to the interior, where the Astra's cabin was far more ergonomic than that of the Chevette's. The all-in-one plastic fascia that slopes away from you to give you more knee room, and it's ergonomically superb. I've got vents here that are close to hand and blowing in my face nicely. All the switches and the radio are easy to reach from the wheel, and all the gauges are in one single box. The steering wheel's in just the right place that I can see them. This is a really nicely laid out dashboard, and the cabin itself is good too. I've got ample legroom despite being over 6 feet tall and having the seat about halfway back. I reckon I could easily sit behind myself here. Not to mention there's a really decent sized boot that I've easily got all my camera clobber in. This is a really practical and well designed interior. That's one of the benefits of using front wheel drive. Obviously you haven't got the prop shaft and the gearbox going the length of the car, robbing valuable cabin and boot space. And that's right, Vauxhall went front wheel drive with the Astra to challenge its other European rivals. And that was significant because this was the first ever Griffin to drive its front wheels. The power plant was all new as well. General Motors Family1 engine, an overhead cam alloy head engine that was designed to be lightweight, efficient, reliable and powerful, all in one modern compact unit. And it was cleverly engineered with maintenance in mind as well. Front wheel drive with a transverse layout, but you could actually change the clutch on it without removing the gearbox, which kept garage times down, and in turn that made maintenance quicker, easier and cheaper. Clever stuff. Clever it might be, but how does this first front-wheel drive Vauxhall actually drive? Well, it's worth remembering this isn't a hot hatch, this is just a humble 1300 family hatch. And yet, it's great fun to chuck around. The steering's light and direct, it grips well, it turns in eagerly, and despite having a rather comfortable and compliant ride with hopping and skipping over the bumps here, and I'm certainly not being thrown out of my seat, it handles incredibly well. There's minimal body roll, I can fling it around with so much confidence. A lot of people would say this couldn't be as fun as a Chevette because it's front-wheel drive rather than rear-wheel drive, but honestly, I'm not sure I agree with that. The Astra feels great, light on its feet, nimble. We can go through the slalom here and just see how that body control fares. It's great. Keys are rolling around there. Despite having never done the whole front-wheel drive transverse thing before, Vauxhall Opel got it right with this car. Every bit as good, in fact, as Ford's front-wheel drive Mk3 Escort. So Vauxhall Opel had put their all into engineering a great family hatch with this car then, but they wanted to start small, to stay humble. Initially you could only get a hatch or an estate in 1.3 litre guys. They were only built in Germany and there were minimal trim levels available. Now it did sell well on initial impressions despite costing more than its rival, the VW Golf. The sharp styling and the practicality and that fun driving experience clearly won some hearts. And launching in the UK a full 6 months before the Mark III Escort meant the Astra got the jump on Ford and initially went to the top of the UK's bestsellers chart. By 1981, Vauxhall UK were building the Astra in its Ellesmere Port factory, and it ramped up production to produce a new 1.2 litre overhead valve engine and a 1.6 litre variant of the Family1, as well as more trim levels, which meant it could cater for more customers. In 1983 came a hot Astra as well, the fuel-injected 115 horsepower Astra GTE, an all-white 80s tearaway that challenged Ford and Volkswagen, and indeed for a time the Astra GTE was the hot hatch to aspire to. But away from the tearaway GTE, it was the cooking models of the Astra that really did the big numbers, the estates, the lower rung hatches, the 1.3s and 1.6s, and they really did do the numbers. The Astra went on to be Britain's second best-selling car, after Ford that is. Despite everything Vauxhall Opel had done to make the Astra the best car it could be, to be modern, to be sharp, to be practical, fun to drive and easy to maintain, Ford still won the day. The fact remains that the Blue Oval's marketing is hard to compete with. The Ford household is probably never going to be seen in a Griffin. But to be brutally honest, having driven a Mark III Escort in various guises, the fact that it outsold the Astra really was just a triumph of marketing. Because the fact is, the Vauxhall looks more modern, it's more refined, I think it's more practical. And if you weren't convinced that the Astra was the all-round superior car to the Escort, the Astra estate had back doors. Say no more. So by starting humble, but putting their all into making the best modern family car they could, the Vauxhall Opel Astra was a triumph. It went on to be a staple of family households the world over, and it endured for over 50 years to the brand new 8th gen car that's as bang up to date and as modern as any car on the market. But if you fancy a classic example of Vauxhall's heyday, back when the Griffin really stood for something and it was a genuine competitor to Ford, you want to seek out one of these Mark I Astras. It's a remarkably charming classic and a car that you can still use every day. But the numbers are beginning to dwindle, there aren't too many of these left. So if you want one, you better shift your Astra. This video is proudly sponsored by Lancaster Insurance. Give them a call on 01480 400 889 for an insurance quote on your classic car. And don't forget to click the link below to enter their latest competition.